Okay. Hopefully third time is a charm. And I'm going to try going live with my guest one more time. Okay, inviting her now. Fingers crossed that this works this time. Ooh. Up. Let's try again. 1 second. Okay. There we go.
Hi.
Okay. Fingers crossed. Third time's a charm. Hopefully.
Yeah.
So
I know I
okay.
moved a little bit, so hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I do too. I completely, it's like downstairs in another room. So hopefully this works.
Yeah.
So I we were talking about motivation. So
Yes.
topic was motivation purpose. So my question for you was, what are your three biggest motivators?
Okay. Well, this is a pretty broad question, I think, because over the years, I think the motivations have kind of changed. But
Mm-hmm.
number one, I think just what my purpose was. So I think when
Yeah.
I joined college, that's when I started learning that something that's really important to me is giving
Mm-hmm.
back to people in however I'm able to. So,
Mm-hmm.
some people are building schools, some people are doing some really big things, and
Yeah.
obviously, I care a lot about that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. But for me, what was something that I could do? And it was kind of using any knowledge that I have to kind of empower others around me. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing that really helped me start Winning Women Unified,
Yeah.
with that kind of passion driving it or
Right.
motivating me, because I really wanted to kind of spread positive energy to other people and,
Mm-hmm.
just make the world a little bit happier, with anything that I had to give. So that's one of the biggest motivators, I would say. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I think that's kind of drives a lot of what I do, because even in my fashion page, for example,
Yeah.
I love fashion. So for that, my big motivator is definitely my passion for,
Yes.
all of that. So, but along with that, I think on that page, something big I like to share is just positivity and
Mm-hmm.
empowerment, even through there, and just a lot of self-care. Because I think
Yeah.
there's more substance to what I want to show than
Yeah.
just clothing. So for me,
Right.
it's about kind of talking about how style and things like that kind of uplift my mood or make me feel even
Mm-hmm.
better, and just
Yeah.
bringing that type of positivity to everyone who I can.
Yes, no, I love it. That motivator of like passion really speaks to me. I think passion is a very strong motivator, and I think passion is super important because it makes things enjoyable, right? It's
Yes,
not
yeah,
just like, oh, I'm just giving back. It's like I'm having fun doing it. And
yeah,
then I think the other one you really talk about that sense of purpose,
hmm,
which kind of underlines everything that you do. And I
yeah,
think purpose is such a powerful motivator because it sits outside of yourself. It's
yeah,
like even on the tough days, because you're not going to love what you're doing all the time. That's just like impossible. There's
yeah,
like always going to be tasks associated with things that you're doing that might not be like you're passionate about those tasks specifically, but
yeah,
like your purpose can help drive you through those harder days. Like, this is why I'm doing what I do.
exactly.
Yeah.
I think in those times when, you're not feeling like you're enjoying every single thing that you're doing, I think that's when even that gratitude piece also plays a part for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because, for example, like working, it's not always something you immediately associate with having fun. But
Right.
at the same time, like I like to gratitude journal as well. And part of that is remembering all of the opportunities that I do have, including working, and why I'm
Mm-hmm.
grateful for that opportunity, and that
Yeah.
kind of helps motivate me through what I do in the day as well.
Yeah, I think gratitude is just so important because I think for me it helps add fuel for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like it feeds me. It's like it keeps my focus on what's going on right. So I think
Yeah.
that's super important. And just remembering, like, again, like, what am I getting out of the stuff that I'm doing? Right?
Yeah.
What is my growth in it? And like where why is it fulfilling for me? I think it's a great reminder of that too.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I think part of, that goes along with like both, sustaining through these days and whatnot is like, how do you prioritize, on in your life? Like, how do you prioritize different things? How do you balance things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think when the pandemic first started, for
Yeah.
example, it kind of gave like so much free time or added time
Mm-hmm.
suddenly, you know,
Yeah.
and that allowed me to prioritize myself a lot more.
Yeah.
So whether it came to just my hobbies or just sleeping more, anything like that, it kind of gave me the opportunity to prioritize myself much more than I did on a daily basis,
Mm-hmm.
because I am someone who puts a lot on my plate. So it was really nice to kind of remember what the main priority is, and it's my health. And as we kind of got used to working from home and being from home and that schedule, it kind of
Mm-hmm.
like time started filling up a little bit more again.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if a lot of people can relate to that, but it's definitely something I experienced because I started finding new things that I could fill into those gaps of time to kind of be useful or make use of that time. But that was kind of me using my instinct to fill out my schedule. So I think it's a constant reminder for me to prioritize myself, prioritize my health. And, and when I say health, I mean like your mental health and your emotional health. I
Mm-hmm.
think it definitely gets a lot when you're adding so much to your plate all the time or just
Yeah.
taking care of multiple things. So definitely self would be the priority. I think a lot of all my relationships are also a huge priority for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I, not just with people, I think even with technology, like my relationship with the things that I interact with in the day, because it's
Mm-hmm.
very easy for me to spend a lot of time on my phone, for example, if I'm
Oh,
running 3 Instagrams or whatever it is. And
yeah.
so that's also another thing that I need to constantly evaluate. Like, okay, like how much time am I spending towards this versus that?
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of goes back to the personal health piece. Um, so yeah, I think that would be my biggest priority. I think next is definitely obviously my goals are a huge priority for me. So
Mm-hmm.
whether I'm working or, shooting content or
Yeah.
anything it's what am I doing and how is that fulfilling or helping me reach the goals that I want to reach every single day? Obviously, there's times in the day when I allot to being lazy and just relaxing, because I think that's also important. For
Yeah.
me, I don't think you can live your entire day off of a schedule. You need to keep
Oh,
some
yeah.
time for for
For sure.
relaxing and
Yeah.
spontaneity. But with the rest of my time, definitely trying to make sure it's getting me towards where I want to be and being happy in the moment, doing whatever I'm doing.
Yeah, I think leaving time for play and spontaneity is so important. I
Yeah.
think because things come up, or like there might be, I've had days where like I'll start with a to-do list, but sometimes I'm like, what do I like feel like doing? Like what?
Yeah,
Forget like what's next on my list. What do I feel like? What item do I feel like going to? Like I'll kind of let
exactly.
like my intuition guide me a little bit through the day, and
Yeah,
I find
I
it
think
makes
that's
it fun.
important. Yeah, exactly. Because the thing is, like whether it's blogging or running an empowerment organization or working, it's like you need to also be inspired to be doing all those
Yes,
things. And I feel
exactly.
like a lot of times, like my extra time spent just having fun is the time when I am very much inspired. So
Yeah,
I think that's why it's important. So as much of a planner as I think I am, I think it's really important to remember that you can't always live every day off of a schedule, like and a to-do list. So keeping that balance again is also a big priority for me and remembering that every single day. So
yeah. I think you you talk about not living off a to-do list, or so. How do you think? And I know you mentioned that one of your priorities is your goals, right? But what do
yeah.
you think about like process and experiencing thing versus like the destination? Right? That was kind of
Hmm.
something we talked about, I think, in our conversation. So what are your kind of
Yeah.
thoughts in terms of those things and balancing that out?
Well, I'm a big believer in enjoying the journey and not just
Mm-hmm.
always focusing on your destination because I
Yeah.
think oftentimes what happens is when you're always thinking, okay, once I achieve this, I'm going to be happy. I think that takes away a lot of happiness that you can experience. Sorry, ignore my phone for a
No
second.
worries.
Um, yeah, it can take away from the experience that you're going through, like the process.
Yeah.
Like, because I think when it comes to the destination, it's really important to have a certain goal, because if you don't, sometimes
Hmm.
you're not working towards you're not working at your full potential, or you don't
Yeah.
really know what you're trying to achieve. So I think having goals and having that destination in mind is important, but I
Yeah.
think it's also important to focus and be present during your process, because sometimes when you're so focused on just your destination, you don't
Hmm.
realize that sometimes that's not really your goal anymore either. Like goals change, your priorities change as you're getting older, as you're experiencing different things. And I think that's more important than just sticking to what you probably thought day one you wanted. Because if you don't want
Yes.
that anymore, it's not fulfilling you either.
Yeah.
So I think thinking about your goals and allowing it to change as you feel like they need to change is number one, very important. I think number two, being present is very important in whatever you're doing.
Mhm.
And I think they both play a part in it.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to be present. I think that's such a hard
Yeah.
thing to do, especially when you're very future oriented or planning. So how do you practice that? Like, how do you put that into practice? How do you work on being present in your daily life?
Well, number one, I think that's something that I've been journaling more actually,
Hmm.
because I try to, so I don't really set like resolutions at the beginning of the year, for example.
Me
What I
neither.
do set, yeah, I don't think I always set like working out more, and it doesn't
Hmm.
happen. So,
There.
okay, okay.
I think it paused.
Okay, well, I see you now. So,
Okay, cool, cool, cool.
yeah, so what I do like to set though, as we were talking about, was intentions
Yeah,
actually. So,
exactly.
so every morning too, I just like to write out like an intention for the day
Yeah.
and kind of what I do have on my to-do list. And when I look at my to-do list, sometimes when you're like, oh, I have this work, this work, this work, you're already like unmotivated to do all of it. But just again, trying to tie all of those things in of being grateful for having the
Hmm.
opportunity to work, and
Yeah.
then getting to talk to this person today at work, or
Right.
whatever it is. I think those kinds of things, setting my intentions, remembering why I'm grateful, helps me be present in everything that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I think this pandemic is also a big reminder to us that you
Hmm.
know today can be so different from tomorrow, and
Yeah.
change is inevitable, and all of these things. And so whatever time we have today is just so, so important, and as present as you
Hmm.
can be, I think, is just so important too. So it's something
Yeah.
that's a daily process, and something that I think we're constantly working on. I don't think
Yeah.
it's ever like, oh yeah, I was present in every single thing today. If you are, that's amazing. But for me,
Right.
it's definitely something that's constantly in the back of my mind, and that I try to focus on.
Yeah, I think I resonate with a lot of what you said about like setting intentions over goals. I mean, I think both are kind of important and both are different and they have
Yeah.
slightly different roles in your life, but I think setting intentions, like an intention is something you can do every day. And
Yeah.
I think I've like talked about this on this, series before, is that it can give you a sense of accomplishment like
Yeah.
along the journey. And I think that's the
Hmm.
most important thing about an intention.
Yeah.
I set monthly intentions and then kind of
Hmm.
revisit them every day, or like I'll apply the intentions that like, apply most of that day or whatever. But I think
Yeah.
intention setting. And I think the other thing is like cultivating those activities that help you be present. Like for me, dancing is one of those things. Like
Oh, okay.
dancing is not something you can like, at least I do a lot of like partner dancing or like ballroom
Hmm.
dancing. And like in that activity you have to like, you can't just like plan what your partner is going to lead you. Like as a follow,
That's true.
which is what most girls are, you can't anticipate everything. You don't know exactly what the lead is going to do. So I
Hmm.
think that is a great example for me of an activity that like shows me like one, the importance of feeling it out or like being present. I think in
Hmm.
conversations, that's another portion, like when I'm out with friends or like even on this live, right? Like
Yeah.
yeah, we talked through a couple points that we wanted to talk about beforehand, but like at the end of the day, it's about listening to what you're saying rather than thinking about what I'm going to ask you, for example, and kind of
Yeah.
work from there. And I think noticing it like when you're kind of being present and when you're not is a super important part of like building that skill. And I
Yeah.
do think it's a skill that you build. I really do.
Yeah. And as you
Yeah.
mentioned with dancing, I think that's kind of for me like painting or
Ah,
driving, whatever it is. Like
yeah,
sometimes like, it's just putting yourself into that position where it's time for exploration or time for
yeah,
creativity or anything like that. I think that's a
yeah,
really nice way to practice being present is doing
Yeah.
things like that. But yeah, I can definitely relate to you on that.
Yeah. Does it ever feel uncomfortable for you? Like, I know as a planner, for me, sometimes my brain is like, if I get into like that flow state, I think you
Hmm.
know what I'm talking about with the, you're completely in the moment.
Yeah.
Sometimes my brain is like, you're not thinking about something, or there's something you're missing, or like you're not planning something. I don't know if you feel that, but I've had to like lean into that discomfort a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's definitely times when my schedule doesn't end up being exactly like what I had planned.
Right.
But I think having a to-do list for me is not about creating like a rigid schedule. Like that's not what it
Mm-hmm.
is for me. Planning is more so like, okay, what are these things that I really want to accomplish today? And what is going to make me feel good at the end of the day on how I
Yeah.
spent my day? So
Mm-hmm.
I think no matter if something I wanted to do was supposed to take 30 minutes and instead it took an hour, like I don't think
Yeah.
that's something I would beat myself up over because it's
Yeah.
not about being rigid. So I think that's a distinction that people should remember to make when they're planning is not about forcing yourself into little boxes on your sheet of paper.
Yeah. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, life isn't, a plan or about rigidity, I
Exactly.
think.
Yeah, I think
It's about
discipline is
experience.
different from rigidity. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
No, I agree. I think sometimes we mistake rigidity for discipline. And I think sometimes
Yeah.
it actually makes harder to build habits of discipline, because I think whenever you're building, and this is true for motivation or passion, self-compassion is so important.
Hmm.
Like being kind to yourself on that journey is so important, because
Yeah.
that actually helps reinforce habits more than being harsh and being super
Yeah,
critical and being
sure.
rigid, right? Having flexibility. So I think, so what is discipline for you then? How would you define it, and how do you
I
put it
think
in practice?
Yeah, I think discipline just boils down to my values. So,
Mm-hmm.
what do I value at the core of who I
Yeah.
am?
Yeah.
And I think that helps me stay disciplined. So, I think
Mm-hmm.
college is a very challenging time because that's a special time in your life when you're very much building on your values. You're understanding what's important to you, what's
Mm-hmm.
not important to you, and then
Yeah.
you're behaving in that manner. So, I
Yeah.
think as I also developed my values and how I want to spend my time, who I want to be, I think that's how I kind of grew disciplined into the daily activities.
Yeah.
So, for example, like faith is a huge thing for me, and it's always been something of value for me. So that's why,
Mm-hmm.
I am very disciplined when it comes to things that I want to do for in my day in terms of
Yeah.
spirituality or anything
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Yeah.
So, I think that's where discipline comes from. So even when it comes to working, I think as having a specific type of work ethic for me is something that I always have in mind because I want to be present during work. I want to be,
Mm-hmm.
valuable to whatever I'm doing at
Yeah.
work and useful. And again, even there, working from home poses its own challenges. But when it comes back to remembering what's valuable to you, that's where I think discipline really comes from.
Yeah. I think for me, discipline comes from valuing my time, which is like what
Hmm.
you're talking about. And I think for me, discipline might not look the same every day. I think
Yeah,
that's the other thing, is sometimes that discipline can be different, and I don't have to follow a certain definition of discipline at all times. Sometimes
exactly.
my playtime, my creative time, my free time, the discipline is
Yeah.
going to look different than like work, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of us are very hard on ourselves.
Oh,
Like this might be digressing a little bit, but I think when it comes to being disciplined or following a schedule or trying to be productive, I think when it comes to any of these things or trying to live to your fullest potential, I think
yeah.
everyone puts so much pressure on themselves today
Mm-hmm.
to do all of that in the right way. And I don't think there is a right
Right.
way because everyone functions differently. Everyone has different values. And so it's about understanding what works for you, what's important to you,
Mm-hmm.
and what's fulfilling to you. So, yeah.
Speaking of being hard on ourselves, right? How do you approach the idea of failure? Because I feel like that's such a big word. Again, like a lot of us put, especially in the South Asian community, a
Yeah.
lot of emphasis on like, oh, what if you fail in terms of even career or things like things that you do in your free time? Like I feel like sometimes
Yeah.
there's pressure to make every hobby into a side hustle, for example.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, for sure.
how do you like what is your approach to the idea of failure, and how do you build a healthy mindset around that?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question.
Yeah.
that I think even I still enjoy asking other people because everyone has a different perspective on that. For me, I think failure comes down to two things. So, one, what do you define as failure? And two, how do you choose to perceive it? So, to one person, failure could be not getting into med school, right? But someone else, failure could be being unhappy at the end of the day. So I think you have to remind yourself, like, what is actually failure to you? Because, especially like you said in the South Asian community, sometimes we're so hard on ourselves if we don't achieve this certain goal of getting into this school or getting this career or getting married at a certain age or, you know, driving, whatever it is. Like,
Mhm.
sometimes it's like, it's so ingrained in our minds, like, oh, that's a failure, you know, or to feel that way.
Yeah.
But when it comes to all my side hustles, for example, I think for me, it was about like, okay, do I feel happy at the end of the day of how I spent my time? Or am
Yeah.
I feeling more tired and more stressed than I am feeling happy and good about it, you know?
Yeah. Sorry, I had like a whole like my arm was getting tired, so I was like, where do I pop this? Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh,
Thanks. So what
yeah,
you?
no problem.
Yeah. Sorry. So no, but I think what you say about perceiving failure is so important because um sometimes even in terms of like defining failure, right? I think a lot of people will define failure in a way that might not align with their values,
Yeah,
right? Like
exactly.
maybe reaching that goal, but like what if not reaching that goal is what made you happy, or like whatever you changed the process, then I think it's really important to like evaluate not only how you define results or like failure, but like where's that definition coming from? Like, or is
Yeah,
it conditioning? Is it really giving you fulfillment? You know, is it good
right.
for you? I think factoring wellness in. I really don't think I really try to not view anything as a failure. Like I really try not to
Hmm.
use that word or attach it because I think you have the experience, right? Like whatever
Yeah,
you experienced on that journey, there's no going back. Like you can't take away the
yeah,
experience that you had yesterday. You still have it,
exactly.
right? And up
I
till
think
the end,
every experience, like you're saying, is valuable to
yeah,
some
yeah. And if
extent,
you
you know?
if you let go of something in the middle before reaching that destination that you imagined, you still have all the learning that you had, and you
Yeah.
still have all the enjoyment and all the process. And this is where like experiencing things and being in the process is also important. Like you talk, a lot of the value is there. So I like to see it as like, okay, at X point, I have everything that I have had up to that point. What have I learned from it? You know, if
Right.
anything, they try to like learn from it and grow from it. And even if
Exactly.
it's a success, right, there's still learnings to be had. So I think I try to view it as more of like a spectrum and a journey over
Yeah.
like success and failure, I think.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of times people also think that whatever they start, it has to be like a long-term commitment, that they can't stop. You
Yeah.
know, I think people
Yeah.
view like stopping as also
Quit.
a form of failure.
Yeah.
Yeah, quitting. Yeah.
Quitting.
And
Yeah.
I think that's another important distinction that, you know, sometimes like giving up is not the same thing as stopping something when you have
Mm-hmm.
gotten the fulfillment that you wanted from it, you know? Because then what's the point in pushing yourself? Like you talked about destination earlier. Like if that's no longer the destination you're trying to reach, then you're
Mm-hmm.
not going to feel happy once you've reached that specific point of success, you know? Because
Yeah.
at that point you're evaluating again, what does success mean to me? You know, when you're thinking about what does
Exactly.
failure mean, you're thinking, is this
Exactly.
really successful if I'm still not even feeling how I expected to feel at this point? So
Yes. Yes. Yes.
yeah, and when it comes to that, I think when you do hit a point of feeling like, okay, I kind of failed in this moment, and then you think, how do you want to perceive that? I think for me, it's anytime I hit that kind of feeling, it's okay, I want to use this as an opportunity because
Mm-hmm.
you can learn, as you said, from every
Yeah.
experience. It's a learning process, and it's kind of something that you have to transition yourself to getting accustomed to each
Yeah.
time of thinking of it as an opportunity to learn and do something new. So if something doesn't
Yeah.
work out that you're working towards and you kind of want to stop, I think it's important to remember that it's okay to sometimes stop and put that energy towards something new that you might be interested in,
Yeah.
and not always attaching that towards giving up or failing or all those kinds of words that can make you feel even worse.
Yeah, and I think holding space for emotions too.
Yeah.
Like you're not always going to be happy about things, or there might be some difficult emotions associated with certain experiences.
Yeah.
And I don't think that necessarily means that it was a failure or success.
Yeah.
Even I think being able to have like a nuanced kind of definition of experience and just
Yeah.
being willing to experience all the emotions on the human
Yeah.
spectrum is
No, that's true.
okay. Yeah. So
Yeah, I think
that's
when
the
you
other
even
one.
when you mention like failure, say you do experience something that you consider
Yeah.
as a failure, you know, I think it's important to allow those moments to come and allow those feelings to
Mhm.
come because I think
Yeah.
sometimes suppressing your emotions can drive you even deeper into towards a hole, you know? I think
Yes.
it's
Yes.
important to understand when something is upsetting you or when something is
Hmm.
not giving you that satisfaction that you wanted to get from it, and then
Yeah.
figuring out how to move forward from there instead of just
Mhm.
suppressing everything and then continuing to move on. So
Yeah.
that's another
Yeah.
way that I think I try to evaluate of when am I failing? It's when am I
Mhm.
feeling so bad about something or so stressed about something,
Yeah.
and then I know that I have to make some change.
Yeah, I think sometimes with those emotions too, it can be like they're not going to go anywhere. I think a lot of people
Hmm.
think like, oh, if I avoid them, I don't have to deal with
Yeah,
them. And I'm like, they'll sit in your body. Like you will physically
yeah,
hold them, and they will come out more stronger or in another way. And I think
yeah,
this is where rest and self care becomes really important. Is being able
right,
to make time in your day or stop for emotions because emotions aren't planned, right? Like yes, you
yeah,
and I think it's a good practice to plan self-care time, like we both talked about in our time, like kind of time management. But like sometimes it's not. There's just emotions that will pop up. You will be triggered by things, and you have to
yeah,
deal with them in the moment. Like making space for those things, and at the end, just realizing that you'll feel better, right? Once you process things
exactly.
and learning and being willing to again experience it and like hold,
Yeah.
and then I could go into emotions and stuff too, but I bringing it home, just like building a healthy mindset around things like quitting and failure and stopping and even distinguishing between like maybe stopping is allowing something else to come into my life, right? That's something we
Exactly.
talked about is reevaluating
Yeah,
what you want to be doing and what you want to be spending your time towards. So
yeah.
to close this out, I mean, I know we're only 30 minutes in, but I think to close out the conversation, since we allotted till 4, do you have an example of where you have stopped something or quote unquote like quit something to your betterment or like made that decision, and what were some of the emotions you experienced with that decision? How did you come to it? How do you look back on it now? How do you kind of reflect on it?
Well, one constant example I think I can give is as someone who likes to content create and
Yeah.
blog, I know a lot of people can probably relate to this, is that there is a lot of pressure sometimes for content creators to consistently always be putting out content, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Oh yeah.
consistency is so important in terms of wanting to do a good job when
Mm-hmm.
content creating and putting things out for people. But at the same time, it can be stressful. It can
Yeah.
be overwhelming sometimes. Like you don't
Mm-hmm.
always have things to share. You don't always have, the weather isn't always the best for you to go out and take a photo. Like, so when it
Exactly.
comes to that, I think that's where sometimes people and even I, when I first started, is like that feeling of failure of like, oh my gosh, I really have nothing to share this week.
Yeah.
But it goes back to again, like, are you sharing things that are meaningful to you, or are you just putting something out because you feel like you have to? So
Yeah.
I think in those moments that reevaluation piece comes back into mind, and it's like, okay, if
Yeah.
I need to take a week off of something, then I'm gonna do that for me, for my betterment. And so the next week when I do go back to sharing something online, I'm able to
Yeah.
give something that is valuable to me that I want to share, and something of substance. So
Yes.
definitely blogging is one thing where I think people constantly feel, or any type of content creating, it's not just blogging, but like
Mm-hmm.
anything like that, is people constantly have that pressure of feeling like if they're not up to a certain standard of consistency or
Yes.
quality or whatever, they're going to fail, or they are a failure, or they're not doing what people expect of them?
Yes.
So that's where I think it really is important to reevaluate and think like, okay, if I need this time off, I can, because
Yeah.
it's important to take care of yourself in that way.
Yeah, no, I love that you shared that example because I know a lot of our followers are content creators and how we're content creators, on our page. So really,
Yeah.
like, great example and awesome. So thank you so much for your insight. I'm glad we were actually able to have a sustained conversation that,
Yeah, I know. I think I need
go
to sit on
live.
this chair next time.
Yes, and I appreciate your patience with me on this and joining us. And yeah, so awesome. It was good talking to you, and I hope you
Yeah,
have a good
you
rest of your
too.
day.
Hopefully we can have more conversations in the future,
Yes,
but
for sure,
yeah, have a great
girl.
Friday.
You too. All right. Bye.
Bye.